Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight, here in person and online. Tonight we are celebrating Janmashtami, which is the birth of Lord Krishna. And by extension, we also celebrate and commemorate our beloved Param Guru, Babaji, because Babaji is an incarnation of Krishna. So tonight we will have a combination of chanting, some music, and periods of meditation, and there will also be some stories about Krishna that I'm pretty sure you will enjoy. Our first chant is Om Namo Narayana.
Welcome everyone to our celebration of Krishna and Babaji, Babaji Krishna. I was thinking today about what I was going to say, and it struck me that in an outward sense, these two incarnations of this divine master couldn't really be more different. Krishna's life it's like a fiery comet blazing its way across the night sky, glowing orange and red and white. That everyone can see. You can't miss Krishna's story. He's everywhere. And Babaji, he meditates in the Himalayas. It's kind of remote, almost like Shiva on Mount Kailash. It's hard to see, he seldom makes an appearance. But the thing that it seems is connecting these two divine incarnations is Kriya Yoga. In Krishna's life, one of the most amazing parts of his life is through the Mahabharata, which contains inside of it, of course, the Bhagavad-Gita. And it makes you wonder just how many times he has brought these teachings back again and again. Because in that teaching, he says, it was I who taught this imperishable yoga to Bibhiswat, who taught it to Manu, the lawmaker, who taught it to Ikshvara, the founder of the solar dynasty, and on through the great sages until it was lost, when people became too material and the priests became too secretive about the teachings. And I think we cannot go on without mentioning this most inspiring and I think uplifting and hopeful of everything in the Bhagavad-Gita, where he says, even a little practice of this inward religion will free one from dire fears and colossal sufferings. And I think most of us here or online who are watching this have benefited from exactly this truth. Krishna also was living in descending Dwapara Yuga. When people had been at a higher level, they'd understood the truth more completely, but they were losing it. And they were entering into the darkest ages of all, Kali Yuga, the totally material age. And he had to have an exciting story, full of action and intrigue, and love and humor, else who would pay attention? If it was just, oh yeah, Krishna, he was that guy who meditated in the mountains and every now and then he'd talk to somebody, nobody would pay attention to that. So he had this amazing life, so that people would keep these teachings alive through the darkness. And within his incredible story is, as I say, the Bhagavad-Gita, maybe even probably the greatest scripture ever written. And so he had all these amazing adventures to spice up his story a little bit. I can speak of a few of them. We certainly can't get into the hundreds and hundreds of things that could be said, stories that could be told. I like the one, so I'll tell this one about when Krishna, he was still very young. He was very mischievous. He was always stealing butter, getting into trouble. He couldn't be controlled. But he was with his slightly older brother Balarama and some other boys, and they were climbing a fruit tree, getting the fruits, but Krishna was still at that time too small to climb the tree. But he wanted to help, and he wanted to be there. So Balarama said, okay, we can pass these fruits down to you, and you hold them for us, but don't eat them. He said, oh no, I won't eat them. I think we can guess where this is going. So of course they were passing down all the fruits to him, and he was shoving them all in his mouth as fast as he could. And I don't know if they just started throwing them at them, but the fruits started landing on the ground, and he didn't care, so he would pick them off the ground, and he'd, all covered in dirt or mud, he just shoved them all in his mouth. And his mother, and then Balarama said, Krishna, you can't eat all this mud. And he ran to his stepmother Yashoda. Krishna's eating mud. Krishna's eating mud. Come, you got to make him stop. And she came over and said, Krishna, are you eating mud? He says, no, I'm not eating mud. She said, oh, look, he is. So she said, well, let's see, open your mouth. And Krishna kind of looked like, are you sure you want to look in my mouth? And she said, open your mouth, I want to look. So Krishna opened his mouth big and wide, and she looked inside. And she was mesmerized because the entire universe was within Krishna's mouth. She fell into the whole universe. She could see the planet. She could see distant galaxies, nebula. If she looked closely at the right spot, she could even see herself bending over to look into Krishna's mouth. And she just stood there spellbound, unable to move, unable to think, unable to do anything. Till Krishna, he saw that she'd had enough, and he closed his mouth. And she kind of stood up stunned and didn't really know what was going on. She just kind of wandered off, and over time the memory faded, and she was again able to look at Krishna as just a little boy. But he was the divine in everything he did. And people forget it, but the divine is all around us. And if we look, sometimes we can see it. Also, another quick story. There was a woman who came to the village, a poor woman from outside of the village. She picked some fruits in the basket. She came, fruits for sale, who wants some fruits? And Krishna said, I love fruits, oh yeah, I'd like some fruits. And she said, well, okay, we'll get something to pay me and you can have some fruits. And Krishna said, well, what's paying? And she said, well, you give me something and I give you some fruits in exchange. He said, well, how about some grain? She said, yeah, grain would be great. So he goes inside where the grain is stored. He gets his little hands. He gets a handful of grain. But he doesn't know how to hold on to things very well. So as he's walking out, he's spilling a trail of grain as he's walking back to the lady with the basket of fruit. And he gets to her and says, here you go, showing her what his now empty hands. And she says, but she looked behind him. She saw where he'd dropped all the grain. She said, okay. And she took the fruit. She filled up his hand. Said, there you go. And she went on her way. At the end of the day, after she'd finished her basket and she was walking home, she noticed that her basket, when she got home, was pretty heavy. And she lifted open the cloth and she looked, and there were all these jewels in the bottom of the basket, which had from her service to the divine and her willingness to be nice to people. And whether or not it manifests as jewels or not, we do receive a treasure when we're nice to people. Every time we do something really nice, we feel blessed. And I'll just briefly wrap up with his stay in the forest. Kamsa, his Uncle Kamsa, who was a demon. So in case any of you have troubles with your relatives, at least you don't have an Uncle Kamsa, no demons who sent other demons to try and kill you when you're a little child. But of course, being the divine, Krishna didn't have any particular problem disposing of them all. But the time came when it was for him to leave Vrindavan and go back to Mathura and finish this chapter of his life. So he and Balarama went, accompanied by Nanda and some of the other villagers. And Kamsa had set up a big event at the arena in town. So they went there, and on the way, Krishna and Balarama, they happened to come across the person who did Kamsa's laundry. So they relieved him of some of the clothes and dressed themselves in his finery. And they picked up a nice shawl from a kind shopkeeper and some perfume. So they were all nicely prepared when they got there. And Kamsa, of course, was planning to have them killed. Surprise, surprise. And there was a huge elephant, a huge ill-tempered, mean, vicious elephant blocking the entrance. And, they said, hey, can we come in? And he said, no, you can't. No, we're going in. And they went in. And they were still teenagers. They were slim, slender young boys. Well, not young boys, but young youths. And they had these great hulking wrestlers set to rip them apart was what they were hoping for. But kind of a David and Goliath situation. But Krishna and Balarama, of course, they're divine. So what are you going to do? I think we know who won that contest. They played with them a little bit to make it seem like they were in trouble, just to get the crowd involved. But there was really no contest. And the same is true when Krishna jumped up on the stage where his uncle was. his uncle, who for all these years had been obsessed with Krishna. He'd been thinking, oh, Krishna, I hate him, I fear him, Krishna, where is he, what's going on? I mean, how am I going to get rid of this? Krishna, Krishna, Krishna. So he'd spent so much of his life with his mind totally focused on Krishna, on the divine, on God, that even though he'd been an evil person, and he hadn't been particularly nice to very many people, his total fixation on God had given him a lot of spiritual benefits when his time, the end, did come. And Krishna installed the former king back onto his throne. And of course, he went on to become the Prince of Dwaraka and the guru to the Pandavas and the great epic of the Mahabharata, and giving his divine teachings to all. And it truly was a life full of sound and fury and pomp and circumstance and intrigue and drama. And it was a tale and a story and a life designed to last through the dark ages, and hidden within it were the deepest teachings that you could ever ask for, you could ever follow. And that is how he guarded these teachings through the dark times that were to come.
I've heard your flute high on a cloud, your call I can't resist. Oh, let me come and play with you. We'll scatter music with the dew and sound the morning mist. I've heard you piping on a hill, all else I've set aside. Oh, let us dance the mountain peaks, we'll skip with breezes on the creeks and soar the valleys wide. Your flute has called me to the fields. Now I've no place to live. Don't send me back, rejected friend. Whatever I call mine must end. All that I am, I give. I hear your call in every tree, in every flower and stream, and sweetest melody of all, a song that heaven's joy recalls. Here in my heart you sing.
Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Hare 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 Krishna, Hare
Let's meditate. Now we're going to have a small section dedicated to Mahavatar Babaji. So this next chant is to Babaji.
Babaji,
And now Dhananjaya will come up and tell us a story of Babaji.
So as we've already discovered, Krishna had a very epic, exciting life. But Babaji's is a lot more restrained. He's not so commonly seen. He doesn't take such an active hand in the events that are going on. But he's no less present in what's happening in the world. His is more of a gradual reawakening and a rising tide of upliftment in the planet's consciousness. His mission has been to, various missions, but one, to show the essential unity of all true religions. And he's done his work largely by helping prophets and great saints and giving them guidance. People like Kabir, Shankaracharya, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Sri Teshwar, Paramahansa Yogananda, and many others, helping to guide them and to reawaken these teachings that have been lost to the lower ages. It was Babaji could sense a flood of vibrations coming from the east and west, of people who truly wanted to know more, a more personal, direct way of communing with the divine. And if we travel back a little bit, when he first met Shankaracharya, he was at the time astrologer Shankara, and I think he's described as a manservant, but I wonder why Babaji would need a manservant to iron his collar, make sure his collars are nicely starched, or I don't know. So I'm just going to call him a disciple. But they were staying in a town, and Babaji sent his disciple to get an astrological reading from Shankara, who was very famous and probably the most highly looked up to astrologer in India. And so the disciple went there, and Shankara read his horoscope, and he said, "Well, this is terrible. This is your last day of life. You'll be dead before morning." And he was like, "Are you sure about this?" I said, "Yes, I'm sorry, but I've never seen such a clear-cut horoscope. I mean, the signs are all there. You won't make it through the night." And so the disciple went back to Babaji and related this news, and Babaji said, "Well, you should go tell him that he's wrong, that you'll be fine in the morning." And he went back and told him, "No, I'm going to be fine in the morning." And Shankara said, "Well, if I'm wrong and you're fine in the morning, come back and let me know, because I want to go and meet your guru and become his disciple." And so the disciple went back to Babaji where they were staying. And that night there was an intense thunderstorm. Lightning and thunder all over the place. Trees were knocked down all throughout the area, and a howling wind. But Babaji had his disciple lay on the floor, and he covered him with his body. And through his protection, his disciple was unharmed. And in the morning, he went back to greet Shankara, say, "Well, I'm okay, it worked." And Shankara said, "Well, let's go." And he got up and he followed him, and he went back to Babaji, became Babaji's disciple. And some of you may or you may not know that Adi Shankaracharya, the first Shankaracharya, he went on to reorganize or organize the Swami system into the schools and the branches that it holds today. And that's one instance of Babaji helping people, guiding them. And it was in the later half of the 1800s that Babaji had Lahiri Mahashaya brought to a post nearby where he was meditating in the Himalayas. And Lahiri Mahashaya's work didn't really have much for him to do, so he got to spend a lot of time walking through the hills, exploring. He'd heard there were great saints in the area. And one day he heard his voice being called. I'm sure probably most of us are pretty familiar with the story, but there may be some aren't very familiar. I'll go over the highlights. And so he followed the sound of the voice, and he came upon Babaji and his band of fellow meditators in the clearing. And at first, Lahiri didn't remember Babaji. He said, "Don't you remember me?" He kind of looked blankly, like, "Why would I remember you? We never met." Until Babaji touched him on the forehead, and he reawakened his memories of the past lives that they spent together meditating. And Babaji reinitiated him into Kriya Yoga, and he sent him into divine ecstasy. And Lahiri Mahashaya spent 7 days sitting in samadhi in divine ecstasy. 7 days, that sounds pretty good. And then, at the end, when Lahiri wanted to stay with Babaji, but Babaji said, "No, your mission is to go back and to spread these teachings amongst the throngs, the hungry throngs who are desperate for some kind of spiritual teachings to help them lift themselves up." And he said, "Well, okay." And Babaji said, "Be sure to follow the strict guidelines and only initiate sincere seekers who are willing to give all for the search for God." And Lahiri said, and this I think is relevant for all of us, certainly most of us, maybe a few, but he said, "But may I not relax the strict guidelines so that all sincere seekers may be initiated, even if they're not quite ready for total renunciation yet?" Babaji said, "God has spoken through your lips. Let it be so." And there are many of us here and around the world who are now initiates of Kriya Yoga because of this conversation between Babaji and Lahiri Mahashaya. Babaji was the first one to call Swami Sri Yukteswar Swami when they met at the Kumbh Mela. They discussed the difference between East and West. The East being steeped more in spiritual values, and the West practical and scientific. Babaji said, "I see that you're interested in the comparison between East and West. You should write a book about this." And Sri Yukteswar said, "Are you sure?" He said, "Yes, you can do it. And after you do it, I will come and visit you." So he couldn't resist that. So he wrote a book comparing the East and West in religion and philosophy. Babaji also said, "I see you are very interested in this area, and one day I will send you a disciple who you will send to the West." And that disciple, of course, was Paramhansa Yogananda, who first traveled to Boston in 1920, spent almost the entire rest of his life in America, spreading these teachings to Westerners, Kriya Yoga, inner communion, meditation. And this is one of the ways that Babaji is influencing this world, aside from the fact he and his band are meditating day and night, who knows how much, on. And it makes me think of the occasion when Paramhansa Yogananda and some disciples were walking past his foremost disciple, Rajarshi Janakananda, when he was meditating in samadhi. Paramhansa said, "Shh, don't disturb him. You have no idea what great blessings he brings to the world when he meditates like this." And I have no idea, but I'm glad that they're doing it. And Paramhansa Yogananda told Swamiji once that your life will be one of intense activity and meditation. Because we're not just individually seeking to know God, seeking to better ourselves, but we too are part of Babaji's mission to spread these teachings and to raise the consciousness of the world. And that's why, partly why we're here tonight, why Ananda Village exists, the other communities exist, why Online with Ananda is so strong. There's such a big motivation for outreach that, we're not just benefiting, but we're helping also. And it's that which we can offer to others, which really makes our inner efforts so much more effective. And we're very blessed to have these great teachers, but we're also very blessed to be able to do our part in whatever way we can to carry on. Thank you.
I have a treat. Our friends Nayaswami, Krishnadas and Mantra Devi performing an arati in honor of Krishna.
let's together, having received the blessings of these great masters, Lord Krishna, Mahavatar Babaji, let's share these blessings with those in need. Let's feel them with us. Know that their presence is guiding us, blessing us, infusing us with their light. Let's call to mind and visualize those we know in need of healing, feeling our connection to them as rays of the one light. Let's offer prayer especially for our divine friend Nalini. This morning at Ananda Village during Sunday service, she had a fall here at the Temple of Light. She's at the hospital with a broken rib. Let's share the divine light with her, sending her our blessings for her health, her comfort, that the light of Krishna be with her. And for all the world and all souls in need, let's pray, Divine Mother, Thou art omnipresent, Thou art in all Thy children. Krishna and Babaji, bless them in Thy light, with Thy grace.